in the media. Defining a trigger warning. The definition of a trigger warning is a warning to caution people with or who are suffering from traumatic symptoms. Trigger warnings are often used interchangeably with advisory warnings as well as content warnings. However, advisory warnings are used to warn parents of possible disturbing content for their children, and a content warning is used to warn a viewer of graphic or offensive content. A trigger warning is used to caution individuals who are suffering from traumatic symptoms. Examples of triggers and trigger warnings. A trigger is anything that causes distress to someone suffering from PTSD from any form of incident or experience. These triggers can cause flashbacks, nightmares, and panic attacks. A trigger warning is a warning used to caution those with PTSD about offensive content. Next, we're going to be looking at trigger warnings in movies. The first movie on our list is Paper Towns, which was made in 2015. Major triggers in this film include suicide, suicidal thoughts, and depression. Minor triggers in this film include alcoholism and emotional abuse. The next movie on our list is Step Brothers, which was made in 2008. A major trigger in this film is violence, and minor triggers in this film include disability, rape, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, PTSD, suicide, and suicidal thoughts. Is Dark Places, which was made in 2015. Major triggers in this film include death, violence, depression, PTSD, pedophilia, rape, and suicide. Minor triggers in this film include suicidal thoughts, LGBTQA+ slurs, alcoholism, physical abuse, child abuse, and ethnic slurs. The final movie on our list is The Girl Next Door, which was made in 2007. Major triggers in this film include rape, physical abuse, child abuse, sexual abuse, violence, and death. Minor triggers include alcoholism, sexist slurs, ethnic slurs, and disability discrimination. How trigger warnings are becoming relevant on college campuses. Trigger warnings are becoming extremely relevant on college campuses today through different guest lecturers in classes and various in-class required readings or in-class videos. Here is a list of popular required readings that have trigger warnings attached to them. Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton, Othello by William Shakespeare, The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, and King Lear by William Shakespeare. Are trigger warnings effective or harmful? A survey completed by Wurtzel and Serlin in 1977 found that only 24% of respondents reported being influenced by content warnings in television programs. The same survey found that while 71% of respondents ignored content warnings, 56% of respondents reported that warning systems were valuable to them. Studies reviewing the effects of advisory warnings suggest they may also have the opposite of their intended effect, especially when directed at young people. high school students who were exposed to advisories before a film had an increased interest in violent films. Preteen boys were more attracted to movies rated PG-13 and R when compared with those rated PG and G. They also found that preteens were more attracted to television programs with a parental discretion advised warning than programs without the warning. In a USA Today article, DePaul University student Mariah Wolfell mentions that she has had an aversion to orange juice ever since she began associating the fruit drink with a car accident that severely injured her brother. And she argues that if the goal is to shield victims from anything that might trigger a memory from trauma, trigger warnings would have to be placed everywhere. In the same article, University of Iowa student Brianne Rickson mentions that she has a father who is severely against trigger warnings, stating that they are supporting a generation of coddling and cushion when things go wrong. Brianne, however, disagrees. I think the decency to not make a trauma survivor's class time a living hell outweighs the possibility for a stunted learning environment. Is it too much to ask that a rape survivor be forewarned when a professor is about to cover material on the topic, or to ask that a person who was confronted with a racial slur and beat up be allowed to leave the lecture hall before course material sends her or him into a tizzy of hypervigilance, a hallmark characteristic of PTSD? The editorial team at the University of Minnesota for the Minnesota Daily argue that only recognized disabilities like PTSD deserve extra classroom care. They say excessive warnings conflict with the goals of higher education. In a separate statement, they state, "It makes little sense to allow students to excuse themselves simply because they don't want to cover uncomfortable material. Colleges and universities are not safe houses for students, and they should not protect students from uncomfortable or emotionally provocative lessons. This student-driven proposal seeks to shield other students from duress, and though it may be well-intentioned, it has no place in a community of intellectual growth." Finally, in response, Rutgers University student Philip Wythe wrote in a column for the student newspaper, the Daily Targum, that trigger warnings are a safety system that allows full artistic expression as well as psychological protection for those who need it. For many students, trigger traumas are daily painful experiences. Individuals suffering from anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and obsessive-compulsive disorder, among many others, are often triggered in ways that are completely overlooked within the classroom. However, by creating trigger warnings for their students, professors can help to create a safe space for their students, one that fosters positive and compassionate intellectual discussion within their collegiate classroom. Finally, in conclusion, trigger warnings continue to be a topic that is heavily debated upon. Some believe that they are effective and protect those suffering from trauma, while others believe that trigger warnings are only effective and useful for those suffering from recognized disabilities like PTSD. Trigger warnings are becoming more and more relevant, not only on college campuses, but all around the world as well, so it is important to know what they are and how they are used.